Welcome to Force Awakens, everybody.
Woo! Sequel trilogy time!
There was impossible expectations for this movie. You remember when they announced it and everybody was losing their minds over the fact that there was going to be another Star Wars movie? And then they were like, wait, but it has to be better than the prequels because the prequels aren't that good. But it has to recapture the old spirit of the original trilogy. And they like gift wrapped it in a plastic Target bag to J.J. Abrams and were like, here, make a movie out of everything that we have here. And hopefully it doesn't suck.
JJ is apparently, he must be getting used to dealing with his ridiculous expectations. Because like you said, the situation leading up to The Force Awakens coming out was ridiculous. And now the situation leading up to number 9 is ridiculous. Because everything, all the divisiveness and controversies over number 8 and all the different plot threads that have gone either nowhere or have gone different places than expected, JJ must feel like the guy who's trying to build a house on like a landslide.
I just cleaned up this mess. Could you clean it?
Clean for 10 minutes? It's like, poor JJ. Like, say what you will about his writing abilities, which are not that great, or say what you will about his directing capabilities, but he has not had the easiest deal with the Star Wars movies.
No, he has not.
This series has definitely proved his worth as a producer. I'll say that much. Because, I mean, he remained a producer on The Last Jedi. He is at least someone who knows how to run the business of movies. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, you know, you can look at The Force Awakens from an apologist perspective. Basically from what Justin was just talking about. Like, they had to make Episode 7 a good business move. They spent $4 billion in the acquisition of Lucasfilm. Yep. They did all these things so that they could appeal to basically everybody. But in this video, I'm titling it Star Wars The Force Awakens After the Hype, because now that we've seen what has transpired in these past 4 years, since the movie's release and like where the timeline has gone and everything, all three of us have thought very critically about like what Force Awakens really has led to.
I remember being excited about this when they like first announced it.
I think all of us were.
And I went on my mission and I was like, cool, I'll be done with it. This is a really like stupid thing of me to think. But I was like, cool, I'll be done with my mission by the time they're releasing it. So I don't have to worry about it.
Well, you say that, and like right before I left on my mission, which for context, if anyone isn't aware of like the Latter-day Saint faith, people in our church have the opportunity to go, well, for guys anyway, 2 years to someplace other than our home and spread word about our faith without basically contact with family for a while. Along with that, we don't watch movies. And so right before I was going on my mission, I heard about the release date of The Force Awakens, which was literally the day I was going to come home. And so...
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
You like literally came home and went to the movie theater.
Yeah, basically.
That's right. I forgot about that.
All of us, I think, pretty much had that same experience, more or less.
Just going back to that hype that you were talking about.
Unbelievable.
I remember distinctly when I walked out of that movie theater thinking that was probably my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time. Like when I walked out of the movie theater, I was like, that was so good. That was exactly what I was hoping for. Because you're right. Like we were hoping it wasn't going to be the prequels. Because at the time, the prequels were the low for us.
Yeah.
Like you don't, like as good as number 3 was, number 1 and 2 were stinkers.
Number 2.
Number 2 especially bad. So as long as it was better than those 3, like it was going to be good, and it definitely was at the time, in appearance, better than those 3. It was an aesthetically pleasing movie. Like it had all the, like you talked about JJ being in the business of movies. It hit all the marks that you should be able to hit when you're making a good-looking movie. We can talk about flaws in the writing now, but at the time, those didn't matter so much because it looked good and it felt good.
It felt like a Star Wars movie. It still does feel like a Star Wars movie to me.
It absolutely does.
And on this watch through, I remember watching Force Awakens, coming out of the movie theater and going, man, that was really good. And oh crap, I'm going to have to wait 2 more years to find out what the heck is going to go on after Luke. Like, they literally paused it and I was like, they had better not stop this movie. They had better not stop this movie. And they stopped the movie right as Luke was like standing there. And it's funny because Mark Hamill, like in the Rogue One trailer, like him and Kathleen Kennedy were standing there for Force for Change or something, and Luke was just sitting at the camera, and Kathleen's like,
Mark's here to tell us what's happening with Force for Change in 2016. Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have dialogue?
Yeah.
I'm used to just staring intensely.
oh, but like he literally
stop.
just I know, but he's literally just like standing there, and I was like, please, I need Luke to say something. Cut. I was like, no.
Can you imagine what it would have been like for JJ's original cut, where it would have had like Luke levitating all these rocks around him, like boulder sized, just like looking like this true Force Jedi master, just like standing there in the middle of this mountain, like meditating, just mountains are like levitating around him.
That would have been cool.
That would have been really cool.
After walking out of the movie, I thought, dang it, that was a cool Star Wars movie. It was a little bit like New Hope, and we all knew that, but I was like, no, listen, stick with me.
We're in apologist mode right now.
All right.
Stick with
We're
me.
accepting that.
It was a little bit like New Hope, but it was different enough that I was like, all right, cool. This time around, I was like, watching it last week, I was like, oof. Because there was a couple parts where I was like, oh my gosh, why is that in the movie? Like, when Finn is drinking out of that big water bowl thing with the like hippopotamus creature thing, and he's like drinking, and the hippopotamus thing hits him out of the water bowl. I was like, I get it, you're thirsty, man, but what? Or the whole Unkar Plet thing where he's like, what a portions.
All right, we're still in apologist mode.
And then like just there was enough, but aside from that, the kind of wonky stuff. The other thing that really boggled my mind about this movie is having seen John Wick 3 and watching those two dudes duke it out with Keanu Reeves. What? They're so cool and they just do nothing in this movie.
Well, it's even worse if you've seen The Raid 2.
I've watched some of The Raid 2.
Have you seen the 6-minute kitchen fight?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, there you go.
I was like, JJ, why? But I will say the part that saved that scene for me was the banter between Chewie and Han. That part made that, and then the Kendra Club part where they're talking back and forth, like that part really entertains me.
Tell that to Kendra Club.
I feel like that's just ascended meme status kind of stuff. Like the same kind of commentary we had about the prequels, like how we enjoyed the memes now rather than notice how bad the writing was.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like that's kind of how I felt about a lot of the writing in Force Awakens.
Or like, I bypassed the compressor.
Oh, that is the worst. I
Yeah.
hate that movie.
The main thing that I think we're seeing this movie backwards through Episode 8.
Yes.
That after watching this, I was like, now I know where this is going after Force Awakens, and I'm like, but there was parts of this movie where they wrote Rian Johnson in Last Jedi into such a tight corner. It didn't make sense to me as far as like where they ended the movie. They probably could have done another 20 minutes and written themselves out of that corner, and I think it would have made Last Jedi a little bit better. But I have my
arguments
theories.
to be made there.
I have theories about how I could have bridged the gap between the two of them, but I digress. The movie's already made. It's fine.
Well, and that also, and I want to bring this up in our video for sure too, but I think that also kind of goes back to how this trilogy was conceived too. Who knows, that perspective could shift when we see The Rise of Skywalker in a couple months, but it's been widely known since The Force Awakens release that their trilogy was basically written with no outline. Like they had basic things supposedly that they wanted to map out, but J.J. Abrams didn't create like a 3-movie outline and then say, Rian Johnson, or Colin Trevorrow originally, you guys have to write your scripts in these constrained areas.
Actually, he's gone on record that he did.
Oh, really?
He did write. Well, JJ did. This wasn't like Kathleen Kennedy in the story group writing it. This was JJ saying, hey, I put on all these lead-ins. Like, we've got the lead-in where Kylo knows Rey, because that's what he's asking about on the Star Destroyer. We've got the lead-in where her parents are actually going to be important in the future. We've got the lead-in where she's got all these abilities that have no explanation. We've got all these different lead-ins. And he did write a general plot line that apparently Colin Trevorrow was actually in agreement with. And so, according to the people that have talked about this in a couple of different interviews and articles, and a lot of it is not very like explicitly said, oh, there's this beautiful outline and it was amazing. No, it was just like, well, JJ had an outline, but then when he gave that to Ryan, Ryan said, okay, but I've got these things that we're going to do. And Kathleen Kennedy agreed with Ryan. And so that's really interesting to me.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's new. That's news to me, actually.
It definitely is kind of like confusing though, because there's definitely been like misleading information on all sides, saying like J.J. Abrams didn't have an outline, J.J. Abrams did have one, and it's like
and
it's just crazy.
How much of it is propaganda and how much of it is like trying damage control for some things.
Right.
Like I read an article where a LucasArts employee was trying to reach out to the people who were actually salty about Star Wars right now and had thrown off Star Wars after Episode 8 by trying to trash talk Rian Johnson but talk up J.J. Abrams and how much he loves Star Wars and how good Number 9 is going to be to try and bring back those fans. And so that much, like everyone called it out for being propaganda, and I can kind of buy that because Disney is a marketing machine.
It's a business.
It is a business, and it is a billion-dollar business.
Mm-hmm. And I studied business in school, so like even though this stuff makes me feel cynical and it sucks, but I get it.
You think about the original trilogy, and there was like no internet message boards or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that stuff that we have now, like Reddit and whatever else, all the online message boards and stuff that talk about Star Wars theories and fan fiction and all that crap. There's just all this stuff that's on the internet now that even the prequels you didn't really have. Like the internet wasn't that big back in when the prequels were out. It's like the internet took off like 09, 10. That's when the internet started going. And I might just be biased because I really wasn't on the internet until then and I just wasn't paying attention. But now, since so much stuff is on social media and Reddit and everything, like everything is scrutinized, especially about this movie. Like you were talking about when we were watched the trailer for Rise of Skywalker, you were talking about, oh great, here comes all those videos that are gonna have the red circles and 25. It was in our group chat, but it was one of those where I was like, oh boy, here comes all those videos with the red circles and the 25 things you missed in the Rise of Skywalker trailer. What I'm saying is, Force Awakens had that, and I'm moving back to the fact that this movie had so much going for it at the time that it was like, wow, it was good. That just restores all my hope in Star Wars. Viewing it now where we'd have everything, it's like, well, the newness wears off immediately because you're like, oh yeah, I've been here. And knowing Last Jedi, you're like, okay, that character's moving that way and this is going that way. And it kind of removes some of that mystique. Because you had a lot of excitement riding into, oh crap, Last Jedi, Rey's going to meet Luke and the Resistance is going to fight First Order and blah, 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 blah. And then the Force Awakens, it sets up all those characters, which I felt like watching it again. I felt like all those characters were good, at least starting out. Towards the end, I still thought they were good characters, and I liked all of them. I thought they were kind of well-rounded. I thought Han Solo was really good in this movie. Like I had mentioned in Return of the Jedi, I thought he was in cruise control a little bit in that one, but I thought he was really good in this one. I thought Chewie gets a bigger voice in this one, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought their dynamic was cool. I thought the Millennium Falcon stuff was cool. And I thought that Kylo Ren is at least an engaging villain. He has temper tantrums, which I thought they're done kind of in a comedic way.
The escape.
He's definitely one of the most compelling aspects of this movie, because if you compare him to Darth Vader's characterization in A New Hope, in that one movie, Darth Vader was intimidating, yes. He had a motivation, yes. And he has an iconic costume and a good performance behind that costume as well, with David Prowse under the costume and James Earl Jones providing the voice. But if we're just talking about all those core elements like performance, writing, and how those blend together into characterization, I think Kylo Ren is better in just how he's characterized in one movie. Darth Vader is obviously a more iconic villain now because 2 other movies eventually gave him more characterization in the prequel trilogy. But if we're just talking about one film, I think Kylo Ren is very compelling. And the kind of comedy that they use to basically show the unbalanced nature of his character is effective in that sense.
I strongly disagree, but like you said, it's your opinion, so...
And that's what it is.
Yep.
I think that he's cool in the fact that there is that one part at the beginning with the village where he stops the laser blast. And I thought that was cool. First time I saw it, I was like, what is going on? Nobody's done that before. And I still watched it, I was like, oh, that's still pretty cool. Especially when Poe walks past it and he like looks at it and the air around the blast is like foggy. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
I think Kylo, like, apologist mode, I thought he was very cool. I thought he was complicated, like, from the fact that we're not just seeing a straightforward evil villain. Like, he seemed like he had interesting aspects to him at the time when I saw the movie the first time, and I thought that was really compelling, and I thought that was really interesting. Now, I just seeing where he's gone from then, and finding out that he was a 30-year-old, but canonically in the movie, so he's like acting like a petulant man-child the entire time. It's frustrating to me because I feel like there was potential there to go and do something better. When you talk about how the internet has raised communication and raised theories and all of these different things that we fans have access to now that we didn't have access to back then for the originals or for the prequels. But I also feel that the bar has been raised in that manner, but so too of the capabilities of the company making it. This isn't a 200-man group that made A New Hope. If there were even 200 people, I think there might have been less.
It was less, I think. I think it was like 150 to 100 people. Like, there wasn't that many people making that movie.
And like, even Return of the Jedi was probably twice that size. Like, it wasn't a big thing. There's 200 people in a single CGI department working on one scene in Disney's movies. Like, we have more capabilities now, so it should be meeting those capabilities. It should be meeting that higher bar that we have, that we've set. But for me, I feel like it never really reached the potential that it could have gotten to.
I'll tell you one thing that I think is absolutely deal-breaking for this entire movie and kind of makes it fall apart. The whole entire MacGuffin of finding the map is just stupid.
I probably would have tweaked that.
I was willing to forgive it in the first time I watched it, but every single time I've watched this movie since, it has made less sense.
And it's one of those things that was mentioned as like, this is leading up to something, but then once Last Jedi came along, no, that really wasn't leading up to something.
So the funniest part about that, there are 2 times when they mention, the map's incomplete, where are we going to find the rest of it? And there are 2 things that make me laugh. One is when Kylo Ren is interrogating Rey and he's like, we found the other parts of the map in the Imperial database. It's like, what?
That makes no sense.
How did that happen? And then this is what I would have tweaked, because this is the only thing that I find kind of just awkward about it, is that R2-D2 just miraculously turning on and happening to have all of the map, and then BB-8's like, hey, Poe, give me the last piece. So BB-8 can roll up and be like, and put in this last piece. I was like,
that was one of those lead-ins, though. Rey enters the base for the first time, and R2-D2 turns on. Why is that? Oh wait, it just happened randomly.
Well, then again, that's another thing that could be changed in Rise of Skywalker. We'll see.
This is just saying.
We'll see.
We'll have to watch these movies after episode 9 again, because I feel like I hope, I don't feel like anymore. I hope that there's gonna be some just soul-crushing revelation in Rise of Skywalker that's gonna be like, wow, Last Jedi totally makes sense. Force Awakens, Last Jedi, it's all making sense. We're gonna start seeing things in 4D, and we're gonna understand everything.
I feel like that hope is kind of desperation, though.
I am desperate
because we didn't do this for the prequels. If there was something stupid in episode 1, we weren't like, oh, well, maybe episode 3 will make this is pod racing. Let's try spinning, and it won't make that better.
Yeah.
Nothing in episode 3 will make that a really good moment. If something's stupid, I feel like we should acknowledge that it's stupid. We don't need a trilogy to explain the plot holes or the flaws in a single movie.
That is fair.
No, that is fair.
That is a fair point.
And what I've said isn't meant to say that we shouldn't do that, but like I totally get that too. It's like there's a difference between withholding information in the way that J.J. Abrams has described it, mystery boxes, and then just having outright dumb plot holes. Like another one.
Yep.
Where did Anakin's lightsaber come from?
A good question. For another time.
That line is the worst. Because
What's
like
funny
it's
is
so
Han,
obvious.
What's funny is Han's like, where did you get that? Like, he knows the story. He knows what happened. Luke got his hand cut off, and the lightsaber disappeared, and he's like, where did you get that?
And then literally Maz Kanata is like J.J. Abrams winking at the audience like, we'll tell you some other time.
And it kills me because, like, conceptually, maybe that could be interesting. Oh, maybe there is a story there. But then most likely, if there ever is a story, it'll likely be told in some book or in a
It'll be
TV
in Forces
show,
of Destiny.
or in Force of Destiny or something.
That Disney Channel princess one. You know what I'm talking about? Forces of Destiny,
Yeah.
the little animated one that
It's
tells all the weird stories.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Anakin's lightsaber Disney prequel series coming to Disney Plus in 2023.
Like, no, let's not explain this in the movie that it's actually happening in. You have to read the comic books to find out. Or, it just kills me every single time that there's all these plot holes in Force Awakens and all these lead-ins that never mean anything.
I was kind of searching the way to put it into words what bothered me so much about this movie, watching it again, where I was watching and I was like, well, that doesn't make much sense and it probably won't. Or like when they do the vision with Rey where she touches the lightsaber and she sees Cloud City, and then she sees Luke touching R2 at the Broken Temple, and then she sees Kylo Ren in the rain, and then it fast forwards to the snowy place where she duels Kylo Ren, and Obi-Wan's voice is talking, which I really appreciated that they went out and got Ewan McGregor, and they went through the trouble to get Alec Guinness's voice to talk in there, which was really interesting afterwards. And I was like, ooh, that's a nice touch.
But just cut a word in half.
Well, yeah, but still, it's little details like that where I was like, okay, that's cool. Which is probably why I still enjoy this movie, because there was lots of little details like that I liked. When it's like, this is the ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs. And he's like, 12. It's like little crap like that where I was like, way to go, Han Solo.
But that's what JJ excels at, though. And you see it in the Star Trek movies, too. Like, he
That's
throws
why
in
they're so good.
references. Like, I was talking with Zach before filming, and JJ, he might not get the spirit of the originals correct. Like, the Star Trek definitely wasn't an action series before.
No.
And so he's not getting the spirit of it correct, but he knows how to throw in references so that it feels like you're going back. Like the 12 parsecs, that's a reference.
Or the little, when he's rifling through the box and he pulls out the little drone, the seeker drone, and he throws it.
At least small stuff like that is okay. Like I never felt like most of the references were really all that distracting, except for the garbage compactor line. But it's funny, but like it's distracting.
I know.
But
That feels like such a Disney thing, though. Like, you know that Han Solo would have been like, all right, so let's kill her. Like, that's the Han Solo character. Like, let's just shoot her and be done with it. Or let's have Chewbacca rip her arms off or something.
Which would have been awesome.
that would, yeah.
But it's more Disney to imply that she's going to get
Plus,
messed
she
up.
has to be alive for the rest of the movies, man.
What I was gonna say though is like at least these references are not something like in the Ghostbusters reboot
Didn't even see it.
where there was literally a scene where they face off against the Ghostbusters logo. I'm not kidding.
Like the actual ghost.
Like,
Wait, what?
and it's shaped in the logo. Like it's just sitting there and it's animated and it says a couple lines and then it transforms into something else.
Oh, is this what you want? Something more familiar?
You can't have something that distracting in your movie when you're trying to like stand out on your own, you know?
One of the things that I would have to say about the sequel trilogy as a whole is that when something is good, you can forgive the small details that are bad. When something's bad in general, it's you have a harder time accepting even the smaller bad details. It wouldn't really matter. That's a bad thing in and of itself that I feel that way, but what really kills me about The Force Awakens is that it's a movie of coincidences. Everything is a coincidence.
Yeah.
As a writer, I was taught that coincidences are your worst enemy. Like, oh, that's funny, it just happened that way. No, everything needs a reason for it. Every single thing, from the first scene in the movie, Lars Santeca received the map directly from Luke Skywalker years before. But he just happens to let the Resistance to know about it now. That's a coincidence. And at the exact same time, the First Order just happens to send ships down at the exact same time. And Poe happens to do this. And then when they're flying away from the planet, Han Solo, despite probably being a galaxy away, just happens to be there, right there. And then this happens, and it's just such a coincidence.
The Club guys just happen to be there.
Every single scene in this movie is a coincidence. Nothing is actually written to take place in a natural way. Everything is just completely coincidental. And it kills me every time that I watch this movie now.
Now I'm totally thinking about the whole movie, and dang it, Jared.
I'm sorry that the series of videos has killed Star Wars for you.
Dang it, Jared.
Star Wars is dead. Long live Star Wars.
Just dead. Ugh.
Dang it, Jared. No, that is true. Like, it goes back to R2-D2 miraculously turning on.
What a coincidence!
Or Maz Kanata coincidentally having Luke's lightsaber.
What a coincidence!
Or that the super weapon is like the Death Star.
What a coincidence! And they just happen to get a scan that tells them exactly how to beat it. Like, they don't even need plans or anything. They just have to go through a quick little trench run.
Oh, yeah.
Or the First Order conveniently tracks them back to their base.
Or the First Order just blows up 5 planets that are within visible range of Maz Kanata's world.
That too. Like,
What a coincidence, guys!
So here's the thing, though. Yes, this movie is built on coincidences. But I feel like there's enough good parts for me that I can overlook those a little bit. Like Han Solo using Chewie's blaster and saying that he likes it. That part was hilarious.
But wouldn't he have done that during their 50 years?
So
knowing
you
each
know
other?
what? I don't care. I'm overlooking
He's
it.
never used Chewie's blaster in 50 years?
The other thing that's funny is when they come out of the basement, the whole building's destroyed. Chewie pushes the block out of the way, and Han comes running out. He's like, pew, pew, pew. And then he looks to make sure the guy's down, and he's like, "Come on, Chewie!" And he keeps running. In Harrison Ford's 70-year-old speed, he's like, "Come on, Chewie!" And he keeps running. Like, I like that part. I thought that the traitor part was really funny. Apparently, like, those two were like buddies in the Imperial Academy, and there was like some deep-seated rivalry between Finn and the traitor guy. And so, like, they fought each other. I don't know.
It would have been an easy rivalry because Finn was written to be the very best stormtrooper in all the First Order, somehow, despite being a janitor.
That's the other thing.
The only
I know how to get it.
black guy in the First Order is a janitor.
I know it. I was sanitation.
Sanitation? That's not how the Force works. Oh, really? You're cold?
There's points in this movie that really shine that I really like. They mainly have to do with Han Solo because he's my favorite character. But there's also points with Rey. Yeah, I know. See, I have a Han Solo.
yeah, I have Han Solo in here too. So
But there's also the part with there's parts with Rey that I really like the whole Millennium Falcon. Granted, how she's a pilot. But now that you've said coincidences, I'm always going to think this is the movie of coincidences now.
Not a coincidence.
Thanks for breaking my vision of this movie.
That's kind of what JJ excels at, is movies that you can just turn your brain off and be like, hey, that's a reference, ha ha ha, let's keep watching. Move on to the next thing. Bright lights and flashing colors. And just turn your brain off. And it's fun.
It's funny you bring that up because I'll make this final point by leading into what you're saying. Like, The Force Awakens is a product. I'd say more of a product than a movie that really adds to the lore. And I think that's what really disappoints me about it the most, thinking about it now, is because that fact doesn't change that this was a really well-made movie. Like, I think it has some very impressive filmmaking in it. The editing and the pacing is top-notch. despite some slow sequences. Like, I can watch this movie and not really feel bored just because there are definitely things happening throughout its whole entire runtime. The camera almost never stops moving, and there's definitely an emphasis on practical effects.
Which
and so,
we all liked. That was a definite plus for me when they were making this movie.
Yes, absolutely. And so, I think from that perspective, The Force Awakens is an example of going back to old-fashioned filmmaking. Like, it was actually filmed on 35mm, and they had an emphasis on practical effects, like I said. And so from that perspective, it was well made, and I think J.J. Abrams was trying to honor the Star Wars legacy in that way. So I can watch it and still enjoy it and appreciate everything that's going on with the performances and trying to make the new characters fit in with the old ones. But in the long run, all the points that we've already mentioned, and then just the fact that I don't really feel like The Force Awakens adds much to the Star Wars universe. Like, there's so many things that are just so thinly drawn. Like, the First Order, we can kind of understand that they're kind of like neo-Nazis, that they're basically trying to take the...
They're North Korea in space.
Yeah, basically. Or, I mean, I basically would compare them to, like, where the Empire was like Germany in World War I, and then eventually history repeated itself with the Nazi regime. That's kind of how I thought of the First Order when I first saw it. But the movie itself doesn't do enough to explain that. It's just the bad guys. We don't know anything about how the politics of the New Republic work. We don't know anything about how the Resistance is organized, except for what we kind of learn in The Last Jedi. Ultimately, it's just a movie there to serve the fans, but not the series.
I've tried to avoid world building because I'm really picky about that. If world building is brought up, I want it to be done right and done well.
Oh, yes.
And so I feel like going into the sequel trilogy, these are sequel movies. You need to reference it and build on what has been done before. But in fact, they actually take away from all the accomplishments of the original trilogy. The Empire's destroyed. Oh no, that's actually back. And better now. It's stronger than before.
These stormtroopers are
Han
way better
Solo
than
learned how to
before.
become a family man. He learned how to fall in love with everyone. He learned how to actually be a good person. Oh no, he's back to being a smuggler. Leia learned this. Oh no, she's back to just being a resistance fighter. Luke, he accomplished all these wonderful things and he saved Darth Vader. He became the greatest Jedi ever. Oh no, he's hiding. Every single accomplishment from the original trilogy wiped out. And we don't really know why, like you were saying. Like, the world building is kind of atrocious. Their entire fleet is around 5 planets?
Yeah.
Really? You want me to buy that? They don't believe that the First Order is a problem, and the First Order somehow managed to build, in only a couple of years, mind you, in the lore, they only started using child soldiers like 10 years before. And so they didn't have an army before 10 years ago. So they somehow managed to build an army and build Starkiller Base, which is better than the Death Star 10 times over.
It's literally just a planet with a weapon built into its core.
And so it's just like, how? Why? Where did this come from? There's no world building whatsoever. Just turn your brain off and watch. And it hurts, because I love Star Wars, but
That's the mentality.
But it's like, this isn't Star Wars for me anymore. It was not made for me. It was not made for a person that likes the world building and old writing and old stories.
Mm-hmm. It's a return on investment, Star Wars.
I feel
It
like
is a product.
I feel like that's the most sane argument that anybody's ever made about this new sequel. Because most people like complain on the internet about how, oh, the sequel isn't mine, blah blah blah, but like they never give a real like concrete answer. They just don't like it because it's not what they want. But I feel like you have reasons that back up why you don't like it, if that makes sense.
Believe me, I've thought a lot about the Star Wars movies.
I've spent a lot of days doing my groundskeeping job at the city of Chandler thinking about Star Wars.
I will say this. As a Star Wars fan, I like this movie. I can see the same thing with Last Jedi. I can see where people don't really are like not enthused about these movies and the direction that they're going. Totally can see where they're coming from. And most of them have valid points, especially you have good points too. I don't know. I like you said, I turn my brain off for most of it and just watch it. I will say this: Rogue One came after this movie, and nobody had any idea what was going on with that movie. And I feel like, especially with Rise of Skywalker, at least for me, I haven't heard like jack about this movie. I've only watched the trailers. I haven't looked at anything online or anything like that. And I think that that's better, because that's the same way that I went into Endgame. And I think that that will help the experience if people don't like delve into the theory territory and all that stuff. Like, I'll just switch away from it just because I don't want the experience ruined.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is what we've evolved into. The original trilogy. This one, it's more picky. You have to kind of pick your battles about this one.
Well, and Jared mentioned this earlier. We are now in a culture that is constantly nitpicking everything. I mean, you can blame that on cinema sins or what have you.
Sins.
But like, just the fact that we have so much easy access to YouTube now, just seeing all these people take away from the heart of film criticism and just, I don't know, focusing on the wrong things. I think that's what the Star Wars sequel trilogy has helped me to remember. It's like, of course you can have your own personal problems and you can have your own nitpicks, but I think what we've established, hopefully, in the discussion we've had here is like trying to go back to the basics of storytelling, of filmmaking, and trying to understand the heart of what these stories should be.
At its heart, it's good versus evil.
Yeah.
Which, really, when you boil everything down into Star Wars, it's the struggle of good versus evil. That's what George Lucas built it all on.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's myth turned into popular entertainment.
Pretty much.
And Space Samurai.
Remember, guys, all this started because of Akira Kurosawa. Remember that.
All right, so what would you rate
Nobody cares.
Force Awakens, Zach?
Go watch some good Akira Kurosawa. But The Force Awakens is kind of a difficult movie to rate for me now because I've said all I had to say, and I agree with you on a ton of stuff.
I agree with you too.
But that being said, I still think, like I said, it's a well-made movie. And on the basis of it being competently made, well acted, in my opinion, and just being able to tell a story that moves, I can watch it and have fun. So I'll give it a B minus, which is, decent. But a lot of the problems I have with the writing are there and will probably never go away.
I'd do an 8, mostly because I still had fun watching this movie, but there was a lot more glaring in my face stuff about this that I was like, oh man. Now that we've talked about the coincidences, the next time I watch it, every time something happens like that,
What a coincidence.
Take a shot.
Yeah, take a shot.
And your liver will fail.
Take a shot of water and you'll be going to the bathroom before an hour is done.
I still found a lot of this movie that I like. And I will agree with Zach. What's funny about this movie is I was taking a filmmaking class at the same time that this movie came out. And so when I first saw it, I was like, I got all of the little filmmaking little tricks that I was learning in class. I immediately applied them to this movie. Like the shot where the light is coming in on Kylo Ren and Han Solo and they're talking, and Kylo Ren's face is half blue, half red, and then the light goes out and his whole face is red, and all of Han Solo is red, and you're just like, red is danger. Something bad is going to happen. Like, I totally got that, and it kind of spoiled that moment where Han Solo dies. It's like, oh, I saw this coming like 40 seconds before it was going to happen. But like, is that type of thing that I really enjoyed, where I can look at it and it's well made, it's well edited. I really like the practical effects and the effort that they put in to make it practical, because I think that's a difference maker for me rather than in the prequels, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Where the prequels would have probably benefited from having not every clone trooper being animated or having practical droids or whatever, Like the prequels would have benefited from the practicality of effects, if that makes sense.
My opinion, like when I originally saw the movie, I considered it to be one of the best Star Wars films because it brought the hype back.
Yeah.
And so I loved it. I was such a big fan. But like we've all noted, that it was just the beginning, and we've seen where Star Wars has come in the years since then. And for me, seeing what Star Wars has become now has changed a lot of my opinion on The Force Awakens, because more than the sum of its parts, it started the ball rolling. The reason we get all of the stuff that we get now is because Force Awakens was a success.
That is true.
Every single aspect that said, because if Force Awakens would not have done well, Disney would have pulled Kathleen Kennedy in the story group and tried to change things to go to a different market and try to alter the course that Star Wars was taking.
I hate to say it, but yeah.
That is true.
And so I feel that even acknowledging the competency that J.J. Abrams has as a director, like, some of the shots are very cool, and it is a lot of fun moments and a lot of witty lines, and I loved the movie when it first came out for those exact reasons. But seeing where it is now and taking note of all the coincidences and plot holes and story threads that did not end up going anywhere, like, it killed Force Awakens for me. Like, I can't watch this movie without saying, okay, yeah, that's pretty dumb now.
Yeah.
And so for me, seeing that now and seeing how Star Wars just isn't as good as it used to be for me, which really hurts to say, and it all started with Force Awakens. And so for me personally, despite the competency, I have to give it a 4 out of 10, which is a harsh grade, and I think the only one that's been lower so far for me has been Attack of the Clones. That's just how it is. I don't like Star Wars as much as I used to anymore. And it all started with Force Awakens.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this very lively discussion of The Force Awakens. I'm sure there are many hardcore Disney fans that have been pissed off by our comments. But nonetheless, we hope that you like and subscribe to this content nonetheless. And otherwise, thanks Jared and Justin for coming back again.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, as
Jared, you're
always.
here for this one.
I was here for the last one.
No, you weren't.
No, I wasn't. Shoot.
We had to apologize to Jared because his favorite Star Wars movies are actually the ones that he wasn't able to join us for.
I missed Rogue One. I missed Return of the Jedi.
That's true.
But I was here for Attack of the Clones. So there's that.
And you'll be here for Last Jedi.
I'll be here for Last Jedi. Yes.
It's so amazing.
That is going to be a
best.
great
That's
video.
going to be the best video.
That is going to be some good content right there.
I believe so.
But otherwise, thank you again for watching, and y'all have a good one.
Okay.